Do you really need a second passport or multiple passports? Well, no, not really. You can do most of what you want to do with one passport, but is it nice? Is it worth having multiple or just a second passport if you can arrange that? Absolutely it is. In this video, I'm going to discuss what are the main benefits of having a second passport. Aaron here from Offshore in Asia. We help people move, invest and do business out in Asia. So if that's something you're interested in, head over to offshoreinAsia.com and have a look around there. We might be able to help you get set up. What we'll be discussing in this video are the general benefits, why you might want to have a second passport, and then we'll talk about some of the travel related benefits, and lastly we'll discuss how you can get your hands on another passport. The first reason why you may want a second passport is you just don't like the direction that your country is going in and you want to go and live somewhere else. So this might be for various social issues that are going on, it might be for the politics that are going on, it might be for a taxation policy that is coming down the pipeline. Maybe the government has already announced that they're going to start taxing capital gains in a different way. It might be an inheritance tax, it might be any kind of tax that's going to adversely impact your financial situation and you want to leave and go live somewhere else, establish a new tax residency in a new country and escape this change in tax policy so you can keep more of your money. And that flows through into the next reason. Depending on how your financial investments are structured, where your assets are based, where you're living, where your business is, you may want to go and live in a new country just because they have a more favorable tax policy there for your particular situation. And it may make sense to become a non-resident in your home country. This will be different for everyone, but these certainly are reasons why some people will want to go and move to a new country. And to do that, a second passport will certainly do the job. Now, if you're a citizen of two different countries, that means you can legally go and live in these countries, and depending on these countries, they will have different rules in regards to pensions, in regards to healthcare benefits. Is there a public healthcare system and that kind of thing? You may find that you're not eligible for a pension in your home country, but you hold a second passport to another country where you can go and claim a pension or it has better healthcare. Things like this can make a huge difference to the quality of your life. The last reason here for having a second passport before we get on to the more travel related reasons is simply to have a plan B. If you just want a ticket to get out of Dodge and get out in a hurry without having to muck around with residence permits and visas and so forth, having a second passport and being a citizen of that country will get you through the gate of immigration into that country, unless you're an Australian during a pandemic. The reasons for pulling the trigger on a plan B is going to be different for everyone. It could be for some of the reasons that we talked about before, being social issues, being taxation issues, political events, there could be a natural disaster, it could be all range of things, and you just decide one day, okay, this is kind of crossed the line, it's time to go now, and then you can do it. You've got your second passport, there's no worries. Alright, now we'll talk about some of the more travel related reasons for holding a second passport. So the obvious ones are different passports have different arrangements with various countries on what kind of access that gets you into a country. So, you know, a passport of one country may get you 30 days on a tourist waiver visa into Thailand, for example. Another country might get you 90 days into a particular country, or it might allow you to go live and work in a European country if you hold a passport to the EU. Depending on where you're traveling around the world, one of your passports may work better with that particular region. So it's definitely a very nice thing to have if you are a bit of a global citizen. Now, a lot of visas when you travel into a country, it could be for a particular residence program or it could be for a tourist visa or a tourist waiver. A lot of countries will want you to have at least 6 months available on your passport. So they won't let you in on that particular arrangement if you only have, say, 5 months until the expiry date on your passport. If your main passport happens to be, you know, down to 5 months, you can't use that. But if you have a second passport and that's still got 4 years on it, then you're good to go. You don't have to muck around. You're not going to get turned around at the border. You're not going to have to do an early renewal on your passport. You can go because you know you've got that second passport that will get you in. Having two passports can also be handy for doing a border run. This is more difficult these days where a lot of countries will scan your eyes and have some kind of facial recognition, but it's not always the case, and even countries that have these systems don't always use these systems. So having two passports gives you a bit more flexibility to do a border run. Maybe you spent some time in a country on a particular passport and that's starting to become a problem for you, there may be an option there to go to another country and then come back on a new passport, and that could give you a new lease of life on your visa arrangements there. It just gives you a little bit of extra flexibility. An obvious benefit of having a second passport is that you have a backup if one is lost or stolen. So if you lose your passport when you're overseas, you're in big trouble. A good idea is to always have a scanned copy of your passport so that if it is stolen, you can take this copy of your passport, this scan, take it to the embassy and get a new passport issued. It's still a lot of mucking around though. And then what do you do if you're in some obscure country where your home country doesn't have an embassy? It's just going to be a nightmare trying to work it out. So the first rule is don't lose your passport. Second rule is have a backup. If you've got that second passport, losing your first passport is not going to be too much of an issue. You probably will have to answer some questions when you're exiting the country because you're leaving on a different passport than what you entered. But at least you have your travel document. You have an international standard level of identification, which is going to allow you to keep moving on your travels. The last travel-related benefit of having a second passport is that a lot of you will know in a place like Thailand, when you hire a scooter, often the vendor will want you to leave a copy of your passport or provide a cash deposit. Now, if they don't want to give you the cash deposit option and you've hired some piece of equipment or whatever it may be, and they insist on you leaving a passport, you shouldn't really do this unless you really had to, by the way. But if you had to leave your passport with this vendor because you just had to get something done and this was the only way to do it, then having a second passport is going to make that a lot less stressful for you. It's also going to mean that if something goes wrong and this particular vendor then wants to lean on you and use this passport of yours that they hold as leverage against you to pay for some damage or, you know, you may or may not have caused, but if something has happened and there's an issue and they're trying to leverage the passport that they hold over you, if you have that second passport sitting in your hotel room, then they no longer have that leverage over you. I'm not saying this is a way to escape paying for damage that you caused. All I'm saying here is that if you do find yourself in this kind of situation, having that second passport is going to give you a few more options and allow you to relax a lot more throughout the process while you sort it out. Alright, so how do you get your hands on a second passport? There's a few ways of doing it. A method that gets talked about a lot is, of course, citizenship by investment. And this involves usually either making a donation to a government or investing a certain amount of money in property in that particular country, or it might be in business in that country, making some kind of investment to the country. And in return for that, they will grant you citizenship and give you a passport. The Caribbean is very well known for this. There's also options in Europe, Vanuatu. In our part of the world, you have Cambodia, where you can enter the Cambodia My Second Home program and get a passport after 5 years. Perhaps the easiest way and the first option that everyone should investigate before looking at more complex and more costly ways of getting a second passport is citizenship by descent. So if you have a parent or sometimes even a grandparent who was born in a particular country overseas, sometimes that country will allow you to apply for citizenship of that country and in turn get a passport of that country just by the fact that you are a descendant of someone who was a citizen of that country. So if you have parents who are born overseas, this is the first thing you should be looking at. You will have to provide some kind of documentation, but it'll be a lot easier and certainly a lot cheaper than going for some of these other programs. Another way is birth tourism. So some countries will automatically grant citizenship to a child that is born in that country. So what some people do is they will plan a visit to a particular country around the timing of when they're expecting to give birth. And then they give birth in that particular country, and then the baby is automatically a citizen. And then often when you have a child who is a citizen of a particular country, you can apply for citizenship for yourself as well, being a parent. Every country is going to have its own rules, but this again can be quite an easy way to do it. Obviously you want to put a bit of planning into it, not just around the timing, but about wanting to give birth in a foreign country. That's not something that everyone will want to do because they're just not familiar with that country. So it has to be something you are comfortable with, but if you are, it can be a good way to get a second passport for you and all of your family. The last main method that we'll talk about here is naturalization. So the common way that it might happen in a country where I come from, like Australia, is someone comes over and they get a student visa, they go to university for 3 years, they then convert to a working visa and they work in the country. They're allowed to work for, 2-3 years, whatever it may be. And then once they've spent a certain amount of time in the country, they can then apply for permanent residency. They can then live in the country legally for a period of time, and then after that they can apply for citizenship. So as I said, this is very common with students that come over to Australia in this case. It could also be used for someone who came into a country initially on a work visa and stayed there for a long time and put down roots and then found a pathway to naturalisation through that. It could even be through marriage, by marrying a local and then in time being granted citizenship of that country. Not all countries will allow this. Australia is quite easy to do it in if you're provided to put the time in. In most places in Asia where our business is focused, it might be quite difficult. Getting a residency permit is one thing, getting PR is even harder, getting citizenship is even harder. So we'll wrap the video up there, guys. I hope you've got a bit of an understanding now of why exactly you would want a second passport. Like I said, no, you don't really need it. If you can't get your hands on one, would you? Bloody oath you would. It's going to open up a whole lot more possibilities, a whole lot more flexibility, just give you more options in your expat lifestyle. If you've got anything you'd like to share, questions, comments, your experiences traveling on 2 passports, feel free to contribute down in the comments section. We'd love to hear what you guys are doing and we'd like to keep the conversation going. Other than that, guys, thanks for watching the video. We'll see you in the next one.